National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation from 1989. This is directed by Jeremiah Chekik. Yeah, probably. Sorry. Sorry to him if he's still alive and listening to this. I mispronounced your name. Written by John Hughes, starring Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, Randy Quaid, Juliette Lewis, Johnny Galecki, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. The IMDb plot summary: the Griswold family's plans for a big family Christmas predictably turn into a big disaster. So this movie for me is on the list and at my top of the list for the second holiday episode, because it captures for me the nostalgia of thinking back to Christmases in the past, but not with rose-colored glasses, where everything was perfect and everything was perfect all the time. It's like, no, like in a realistic way, where you're not going to always have, or probably never, the perfect Christmas, because that is an impossible goal to have. But it's still, if you're surrounded by your family, it's still fun memories to think back on, even if things always didn't work out like either you had wished or like you had planned. And I think this movie captures that really well, because it's really not, the point of Christmas isn't to have the perfect Christmas every year where everything is always goes according to plan. It's just, again, to be with the people that you love and with your family, and the people that you care about and people who care about you. And what I think this movie does well to convey this is that it kind of goes through a lot of the things that you do remember at growing up with celebrating Christmas, and even due to this day, picking out the tree, hanging up Christmas lights, going Christmas shopping, having the relatives come over, eating the family meal. But it has all those things, but they're all not perfect. Like the Christmas tree is they cut it down and it's got animals living in it. The meal that they make, the turkey is terrible. It like deflates on the kitchen table. Hanging up the lights, Chevy Chase like falls down, and there's all these kind of disasters that happen to him. The family fights a lot when the relatives come over. So it's not perfect, but Christmas never was. And I think that's what I see whenever I watch this movie. It's like reminds me of all those great memories. And yeah, like I sort of appreciate the fact that they are not through just the lens of nostalgia where everything was perfect. And then, there's some schmaltzy moments in this movie too. There's a sequence where, Clark gets trapped in the attic and he's go back watching old movies of his childhood Christmases. So that is definitely like played for, oh, everything was perfect. Back then, why is it so perfect? But then there's a great kind of counterpoint to that moment when, after Clark kind of reminisces and his dad's there and he's talking to his dad and saying like, look, like, I'm trying to create this perfect Christmas. Like, it was always perfect for us. Like, how did you do it? Dad, how'd you do it? And he's like, well, I had a little bit of help with from Jack Daniels, like implying that it was hard and it actually really wasn't perfect even back then. And that now, Clark is the dad. He's going to have to, deal with things not being perfect, even though you strive for it. And I think that's really like how I, again, look back on my Christmas memories and the hopes and dreams when you're a kid. You look forward to that day every year. And, it's going to be not perfect in some way. Maybe you burn the cookies a little bit, or you don't get all the gifts you want, or, the gravy's a little bit off that year or something. But look, that's sort of the fun of a realistic Christmas with the family. So this movie actually is interesting because I like the Vacation franchise, the Vacation franchise that Chevy was in, but I always really liked the European Vacation as a kid, and this movie wasn't really in much heavy rotation when I was little. Like, I wasn't a big fan of Chevy Chase really, outside of European Vacation, a couple of other films. But the older I would get and just kind of stumble upon this movie, over the years on TV or something, it did start making me appreciate more of the theme that I was just mentioning. It's like looking back and realize things weren't perfect and having Christmas memories you can think back to from 10 or 15 years ago. And then it started really resonating in me a lot more. And I really grow to appreciate this movie a lot more and find it actually really funny, but also endearing, and, kind of identify with Clark Griswold in certain ways. I mean, not that I'm a father who's trying to create the perfect Christmas for his family, but it just, it makes me appreciate a lot more just the reality of the life that we live that isn't always perfect. So it's just interesting. Like, it helps me appreciate Christmas more. The fact that I'm seeing this movie now, it is in my rotation now in like the past 5 or 6 years, but I didn't really come to appreciate it, I guess, in that way, when I was little. But it's not perfect. I think, the 80s came out in the late 80s, so there's definitely like a lot of, themes of materialism that I think, John Hughes kind of plays with a little bit in most of his films. And it just still is, the older I get too, it's like the way that the movie treats their neighbors, who Julie Louis-Dreyfus and this other guy who are just trying to have a good time, like, just hang out, have their version of Christmas, which is just some wine alone, no kids because they don't have any, and just enjoy it. The movie just consistently like kind of gives them a hard time. Like things smash through the windows, everything goes wrong for no reason, and they're like mad at the Griswolds, and I'm like, okay, they should be mad. And like, why is the movie like crapping on them so much?
Right.
So I still don't really. I mean, I kind of get they're trying to juxtapose people who the movie's kind of judging these folks who don't have a family, so it's not like it's a cold and not really a real warm Christmas. And the Griswolds,
and they're fit. They go for a run. Right. Must be demonic.
Exactly. Well, yeah. Well, that's the 80s too, right? But so that always rubbed me the wrong way, and it still even does more the more and more I watch this movie. I kind of wish they could have just excised all those scenes from the film, but no, again, I think this captures perfectly a realistic Christmas by showing a comedy where it's heightened reality in the film, but that just helps you remember that, yeah, like your Christmases weren't always perfect too, but in a way they were, because you're with your family, hopefully with your family. So that's Christmas Vacation, 2 John Hughes movies back to back.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. They could have been a third one almost, but I would talk about that in my honorable mentions.
Oh,
but,
okay.
I had not seen this movie before. So yeah, all 3 of her movies I had not watched before. So this was my first time seeing it. I think I've seen maybe one other National Lampoon movie, maybe just Vacation, but I don't remember much of it. So I don't really have, a sort of personal deep connection with the Vacation National Lampoon series per se. Your read on the movie, when I'm hearing it from that lens, actually makes me want to go back and watch it again with that sort of read. But I think I really found it pretty hard to sort of get over what we were just talking about, which is, or I don't think we mentioned that, but this sort of man-child person trying to sort of save
Chevy. Yeah.
Christmas, and do all these exaggerated heightened things and the lights, and then everybody else is in the wrong because we're trying to do this for this, however old he is, looks 50 to me. 50-year-old man. I found that really silly and hard to kind of get over with it. And again, I get it. Like, this is, when do you watch these movies? If I had watched this movie as a teenager, a 20-year-old, what have you, I think it would have just been automatically in the rotation and just sort of lived with me. And I know that is the case for so many people. Like, this movie is on
I know a lot of lists,
movies across the board, always has been. So I apologize, I'm not a cold-hearted Grinch to not like this movie, but I think it has to do a little bit with, when are you meeting this movie, and just meeting it now as in, in my older years, in my dotage, it's sort of hard to empathize with this character of why are you kind of putting yourself really and your family through all this. But I do appreciate your read on it, which is kind of trying to make things perfect with this sort of faulty memory that things were always perfect, but actually they've never been perfect. That, I think, makes the movie a lot richer, but I found it quite hard to kind of see that. I was sort of caught up in the shenanigans, if you will, and they were often annoying.
Yeah, like as I mentioned, like I'm not a Chevy guy. Like some people, like Chevy was like their comedic idol growing up.
Right.
Like I never really was into Chevy.
Same.
And I think if I had also came to this movie for the first time right now too, it's not the fact that I'm older necessarily. I think it's just that I've seen it so many times now and hadn't really liked it much. As like again, this movie I was like, it's kind of overrated. It's not really my thing. I'm not into Chevy, and I just sort of like marinated in it just because it was always kind of around. Then I was like, oh, I kind of like now sort of have this kind of nostalgia for it, and then saw through into this message that I now take from the movie and can now enjoy those things other than how they treat the neighbors. Even though, yeah, Chevy's totally a boob, but that's kind of like his aesthetic, which I'm not like a Chevy guy now. So it didn't convert me to that. But I totally get where you're coming from, of just like the silliness of the film is because it is so, because Chevy is very like physical comedy, over the top, kind of slapstick too. It's easy to get kind of distracted through that, which again, I was too for a long time.
And more so than him, I think it's the writing, and maybe it's also the time period. Like, I feel bad for the wife and the children of his. Like, they have to go through all of this for really what, And so, and again, maybe if he also looks so old in the movie, which also doesn't help. Like, he looks 50, which sort of makes it even more comical, that comical in like a bad way, that gosh, you're still stuck on this. Like, why? You need help, like actual help. So, but I like your read, and I don't know, maybe I if you say that the European Vacation is your favorite, maybe I'll go watch that, because I don't have anything against Chevy. I think he's fine. I just also have not seen too much of his stuff, so I'm not willing to kind of write him off or the whole franchise off just yet. But yeah, this didn't really land.
Yeah, no, I can understand, especially the first. We said you think you might have seen the first Vacation, but this being the first of those films to see, I could see where this would not, like, because he learns the same lesson in every movie. It's like a franchise, right? So he has to be like overly trying to be the perfect dad, and then he kind of messes up in every potential way, and it's not perfect. And I think that is again what John Hughes was trying to go for with this franchise of you relate to him because he's striving for the best but never gets there, whether it's a family vacation out west or a big trip to Europe, you get the family together and everything's going to be great. But for some reason the Christmas thing resonates with me now more than those others in a way. I kind of forgive it a little bit, because you do, like, striving for the perfect Christmas is something I think a lot of people can relate to a little more than like putting a road trip out to Wally World, like in the first film, on some kind of pedestal. But I hear you on the
I would say if the wife especially, and maybe the kids to a point as well, just had like a little bit more agency, so it was just not his show entirely, I think I would be a lot more on board with it, because then it would feel like, and I think that's what Home Alone and other movies and such. Well, actually, I shouldn't say one, because that's very much the mom's show. The dad is sort of
right. The dad's
not in the
really
picture
there
per se, from a parent's standpoint. But yeah, I think watching this movie now, I'm like, what is the wife doing? What is she doing? Like, she should be putting her foot down or talking to this man-child, but maybe that is the point, that they don't have those kind of conversations, perhaps.
That might speak more to Chevy Chase as an actor who was like one of the biggest egomaniacs in Hollywood. That sort of captured in his movies, where the movie's literally just about him and no one else has any agency, because it's all about Chevy, which is the opposite of what Christmas and holidays are all about. You shouldn't be self-centered. And you should just give more than you receive.
So I guess the movie is metatextual.
I guess,
in that sense.
I guess so. Yeah.
Sorry, we don't mean to poop all over on Chevy Chase. I'm sure people love him, and that's fine.
Yeah. I'm not gonna defend. I'm not a Chevy guy, so I'm not gonna defend him. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.